Hi everybody, thank you for tuning in and welcome to the Cosmic Busker. My name is Bobby Cody. This video is the Cosmic Busker on the Cosmic Hoax and Expose. The Cosmic Hoax and Expose is a documentary movie that was done by Dr. Stephen Greer. It was released on July 4th. It's free and open source. It is on my YouTube channel. You can watch it there. I'll put up a link so you can watch it if you haven't watched it already. In this video I want to do an analysis of the information in the documentary, which I almost completely agree with. There are a few things that I disagree with, and I want to go through why I disagree and clarify it based on information that I've already provided on my YouTube channel here, the Cosmic Busker. I'll provide a few links as well so you can further do the research yourself and make up your own opinion. For those who aren't familiar with Dr. Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer is well known. In 2001, he set up a press conference at the National Press Club in which he presented a whole bunch of highly credible witnesses, including military contractors, military soldiers, who gave their testimony regarding their experiences with UFOs. And each one of them said, and I will be willing to testify before Congress regarding this. Each one of them, highly credible witnesses, had some very fascinating stories regarding their experiences with the UFO phenomenon. What I'm going to do right now is post up a link up there. It's about 2 hours long, the video, so you can take a look at that 2001 conference that was organized by Dr. Stephen Greer. Dr. Stephen Greer also has what's called the CE5 app. CE5 stands for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, my understanding, is where you actually get in communication with UFOs or aliens. That's why it's the fifth kind. Some people may be familiar with the movie Close Encounters of the Third or Fourth Kind. This is of the fifth kind. So you can take a look at that as well. I'll have more information about that. It's actually at the end of the documentary. There's information on that. I'll post some links down below as well if you're interested in Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. So I want to go right now to a clip from the movie or documentary provided by Dr. Stephen Greer, in which he essentially synopsizes some of the hoax that the documentary will be exposing. We'll cut to that, and then we'll come back and talk about further clips and what we're going to do. So let's take a look at that right now.
These lies include ETs or demons. It's all interdimensional, not extraterrestrial. We don't have man-made UFOs. Aliens are abducting people. And the worst one of all, aliens are a threat. Therefore, we need to build weapons in space.
All right, so here we had the list of 5 basic hoaxes or lies that the movie is going to expose, as told by Dr. Greer. The first one, ETs or demons, I'm not going to even touch it. People who believe that ETs are demons, that's a religious belief. I'm not looking to argue with people's religious beliefs. I'm not looking to convert anybody away from their religion. Not even going to touch that one. If you believe ETs are demons, I don't think I'm going to be able to convince you otherwise. And I just want to stay away from any religious aspects of this. So I'm not even going to touch that one. And I really don't think that the documentary does either, based on my watching of it a couple times. I don't remember anything really tried to dispute that, other than some aspects of their behavior, which we'll talk about, UFO behavior, which will be talked about. Another thing that's spoken of, another lie, is that he talks about all UFOs are interdimensional. Now he says all. He's not saying that some aren't interdimensional. Now, a lot of people be like, interdimensional? What are you talking about? What kind of sci-fi BS are Dr. Greer and Bobby Cody talking about? What our science is beginning to understand is that, we live in a 3 or a 4-dimensional world. Dimensions, length, width, height, right, are the 3 dimensions, and then time being the 4th dimension. What scientists are beginning to understand is that we actually live in a higher dimensional world. I've actually done a video on this, and one individual actually called me out on it. He said, "Oh, I started watching your video until you talked about higher dimensions." And I said, "Oh, you don't believe in higher dimensions? Okay, here's why I think there are higher dimensions." And I think it was a 20 or 30 minute long video. It's one of the first videos I've done, so it doesn't have a lot of views. I'll post a link to that video down below. I may throw up a card here as well, so that you can click on it right now if you'd like. I may not, I'm not sure yet. It depends on, I have a limit on how many cards I can throw up in the corner there, so we'll see if I'm gonna do that. But there's little doubt at this point that we live in a world in which there are more than 4 dimensions that we currently perceive as humans. One of those scientific theories is called string theory. String theory, I've seen it posit 10 dimensions, maybe 11. Again, I've done a video on that in the past where I go through the whole thing on higher dimensions and why scientists believe there are higher dimensions. So I highly suggest you take a look at that so you can get an understanding of the basics of it, and that this isn't some, Moomba Jumba garbage. It's very well based in mathematics and science and observation. So now what I want to do is I want to turn to this next clip that we're going to look at. This is Carol Rosin. Carol Rosin is, she was a spokesperson for Wernher von Braun. Wernher von Braun is essentially the father of the NASA space program. Without Wernher von Braun, there would be no American space program, no Apollo program. We never would have been able to go to the moon, which we did do, despite what people claim. America did land on the moon. There are some lies and deflections regarding our space program and our landing on the moon. There's no question about that, but we did, the evidence is abundant in that regard. And maybe I'll do a video later and someday talking about all of the misinformation that people who deny America landed on the moon give out and how easy it is to refute those claims that they make. But right now I want to go to Carol Rosin, spokesperson for Wernher von Braun, and she's going to talk about what Wernher von Braun used to tell her and the warning that she used to give her that is of vital importance at this point that we know right now. It's one of the main reasons why Dr. Greer did this video. Let's take a look and cut to that clip right now from Carol Rosin.
Now here was von Braun sitting at a desk when I first met him, explaining to me that he was told he only had 3 to 6 weeks to live, but that he was going to stay alive long enough to teach me what the real game is that's going on. And it started out when I was in the industry, the Russians were the threat. We had to build space-based weapons against the Russians. And then third world countries called nations of concern at that time. And then the asteroid threat, which I thought was kind of comical that we could just put weapons up there to shoot down or steer an asteroid. And then it leads to the last card.
And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat.
He explained to me that there was a moment when we were going to be told that the extraterrestrial beings, that their craft were a threat, and they were not.
These craft that have come here are now not UFOs, they're identified flying objects, and we know that they have beings in them. And we have witnesses here who have told you that they can shut down our missile silos. They can stop a rocket going into space that's a test. We have witnesses here who have worked in the classified departments who have the courage to come forward here to support what Werner von Braun told me back in 1974 to 77.
At the end, I said, and it's all a lie. Well, it's still all a lie.
Now, what Cal Rosen is warning about here is known as what's called a false flag operation. Now, false flag operation, I want to talk about real quick what a false flag operation is, and how it gets its name. False flag operation is essentially, I'm going to give you a hypothetical. Let's say American generals, high up generals and admirals, they want to go to war against England. But they need to get the support of politicians and the American public to be able to go to war against England. Well, they get a whole bunch of their elite troops who are willing to do this, and they say, all right, we need you guys, you American troops, to do is we need you to go in and attack our own American people. So we get American soldiers to attack American people, and when soldiers or troops go fight, they fly their flag. Americans, when they fight, they fly their American flag. What these generals say is, all right, we're going to have you American troops attack American people, but you're going to fly the British flag. So you have American troops flying the British flag, attacking American people. That way they can say, British are attacking us, Americans. We have to go to war against the British. And it's a way to manipulate politicians and the population into supporting a war where there was no real attack. The attack was actually perpetrated by your own military forces. So that's a false flag operation, and that's where it gets its name. So now we're going to take a look at something that was said by Wesley Clark in this clip. This clip from the movie again, Cosmic Hoax and Expose, goes to General Wesley Clark. General Wesley Clark ran for the Democratic nomination for president, I believe it was 2004. He's a very esteemed general. He was a valedictorian at his graduating class, and I think it was West Point. He was a Rhodes Scholar, so he's a highly intelligent, well-renowned, well-looked upon general. And we'll see what he has to say. I believe this clip is from 2007. What he has to say regarding false flags and how the public may be manipulated into fighting wars. Let's go to that clip right now.
He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me.
All right, so there you have General Wesley Clark, highly esteemed, talking about a plan to invade 7 countries in 5 years. Now, unspoken there, although the inference is there, and I can't remember if he actually made the connection or not in that interview. I remember this interview from a long time ago. It was 2007. I don't know if he actually made the connection or he just inferred it. But he's talking about 9/11. That 9/11, the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center and Pentagon were used as, or planned to be used as an excuse to invade and overthrow 7 countries in 5 years. They didn't succeed in that regard, but In that list, Iraq and Libya were both invaded. No question about it. Libya took a while. It was Barack Obama who did that one, who took out Libya. And what a big mistake that was, at least for Europe. That I won't get into why that's another whole big discussion. But the inference or implication that those attacks were used as an excuse to potentially invade these 7 countries in 5 years. Implication is that 9/11 was a false flag attack, that our own U.S. government either perpetrated the attack or allowed it to happen. Now, a lot of people are taken back, go, oh, the U.S. government would never do that. We have evidence that the U.S. government, the U.S. military, made plans like this before, and I'm going to show you unequivocal evidence that they have at least planned this in the past, if not actually perpetrated it. I'm going to throw up right there right now. This is WABC news article from, was it 2006? It is January 7, 2006, by David Rupe. Headline reads, U.S. military wanted to provoke war with Cuba. Okay. In the early 1960s, actually this is a May 1st, 2001 article, excuse me. In the early 1960s, this is before 9/11 happened, this article came out. And after 9/11, they may not have posted this. In the early 1960s, America's top military leaders reportedly drafted plans to kill innocent people and commit acts of terrorism in U.S. cities to create public support for a war against Cuba. Codenamed Operation Northwoods, the plans reportedly included the possible assassination of Cuban immigrants, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, hijacking planes, blowing up a U.S. ship, and even orchestrating violent terrorism in U.S. cities. And the plan was to say, oh, Cuba did it. So the U.S. military in Operation Northwoods wanted to perpetrate their own attacks against their own American people so that they can invade Cuba. This plan was presented to the Kennedy administration, and President Kennedy said, no way. This is just one of many potential reasons why he may have been assassinated by elements of the United States government itself. So, if you don't look this up yourself, Operation Northwoods, you can do your own research. 9/11, there's abundance of evidence as well. If you can find it, there's firefighters from 9/11. There's a video of firefighters on 9/11 talking about bombs going off in the World Trade Center. World Trade Center was more highly secured than the White House itself. The only way bombs could have been going off in the World Trade Center, there's only one organization that could do that, and that would be the United States government itself could plant the bombs and set them off. There's no way Muslim terrorists could have gotten into the World Trade Center and set off these bombs. So, and there's also, I should mention, there's molten lava flowing at the bottom of the World Trade Center towers for days. Molten steel. The claim is that it was jet fuel that caused the towers to, the fires, and caused the towers to collapse. Well, jet fuel can't turn steel molten and cause lava to be flowing at the bottom of the World Trade Center towers for days afterwards. It's just not possible. If jet fuel could melt steel and cause steel to go molten, there would be planes falling out of the sky as they melt the engines that contain the jet fuel. Got it? It's just not possible. So when you see this, you know that you're not being told the truth and something else is going on. And so we have two potential false flags. Operation Northwoods, which is well documented, and 9/11, which some people still believe was not a false flag operation. Do the research, and if you do the proper research and you evaluate all the evidence, in my opinion, you'll find that unfortunately it was a false flag operation. So this has been number 4, and the warning in this video is that they're planning another one, and this time it's going to be aliens. They're going to do the attacks themselves and then blame it on the aliens. All right. So now we're going to move on to Dr. Greer talking about UFO investigators and how they've been misled. We'll go to that right now.
Truth seekers who explore the wonders of the ET phenomenon walk an extremely dangerous path. Most get sucked into the gravitational pull of the black hole of disinformation, where lies about the UFO cover-up and about ETs themselves poison the minds of even the smartest and most well-intentioned investigators.
Okay, I want to use that clip as a jumping off point to talk about 2 of the UFO investigators or UFO claimies that are pictured in that clip. The first one I want to talk about, and we'll throw a picture of him right here, is Corey Goode. I've talked about him very, very limited, on a very limited basis on my channel, and it's because his claims are so outrageous. I have a hard time believing that they're credible. But I want to talk about his claims, and I do watch his information. I do listen to what he says. It's not that I don't think he has some information that I think is viable, but it's the claims, what he says happened to him, are just so over the top. It's important to me that I'm presenting information that already is hard for the average person to believe. That for me to say, oh yeah, this guy Corey Goode, you should believe him, I don't want to make that claim because I don't even believe him. But I want to talk about what he says so that you have an understanding of it, and perhaps why I don't think he's credible. Although he does come across as believable. So Corey Goode says that ever since he was a 6-year-old, he was an empath for what is the secret space program. He states that they took him as a 6-year-old, that he had these empathic qualities, and that he was, ever since that age of 6, he was working for the secret space program in what's called the 20 and Back program. Okay. In the 20 and Back program, he says that he goes and works for 20 years for this secret space program, and then they revert back in time and put him back in his body as a 6-year-old so he can continue living his life. But he lives his life with having already experienced this. It's very bizarre. And I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's so outrageous. But he also makes a claim that he is now working with these aliens called the Blue Avians, and these blue avians here are associated with the founders of the ancient Egyptian civilization and all this stuff. He's currently actually suing Gaia. He had a TV show on Gaia.com, which Gaia does things on UFOs and spirituality. He's suing them, and I don't want to spend too much time, but the reason I'm actually giving you this information is because, hey, if you're interested, take a look, but also to talk about why I actually listen to his information. It's because you can pick out some information that I believe is true. There's always even in stuff that's not, you may not think is credible, you can take snippets of information that are true and is credible. And what Corey Goode talks about is that what brought the aliens or the UFOs here is our explosion of a nuclear bomb. Once we exploded, first in New Mexico, we set one off, the test bomb, and then we set off two in Japan to end World War II. He says that this is what attracted the aliens or UFOs to the Earth, and that he talks about how what this nuclear bomb did is that it reverberated through the cosmic web. When you set off an atomic bomb or a hydrogen bomb, nuclear bomb, it reverberates through the universe. It's felt all through the entire universe, and it does a lot of damage to the fabric of the universe. Now, there is this cosmic web. I will post a recreation of the cosmic web. So there is a cosmic web, and I suspect that that is one of the true aspects of it, and that's one of the reasons why I take in all this information, even though I believe Corey Goode may not be credible. I don't want to say he's not credible. To me, he doesn't come across. He comes across as truthful, but not credible. Take that for what it is. But that cosmic web and the fact that nuclear explosions actually reverberate throughout the universe and across this cosmic web, I think that is true. And now this cosmic web, you have to get a sense of how huge this is, that cosmic web that I'm going to throw up right there. A little tiny piece of that cosmic web, just a little tiny piece. If you take that cosmic web and you say, all right, here's a little tiny dot of that cosmic web, that's our galaxy. And our galaxy consists of billions of stars. So in a little tiny piece of that cosmic web is our galaxy, and billions of stars are inside that little galaxy. That gives you a sense of how expansive this cosmic web is. This cosmic web is made up of a whole bunch of galaxies strung together, and these galaxies are hugely far apart. You just get a sense of the immensity of the universe. Now, just to continue on and mention a little bit more about Corey Goode and Gaia, there's also another individual who has who continues Corey Goode's story and is expanding upon it. His name is Jason Rice. He's now on Gaia. He makes claims that he was he wasn't Corey Goode was an empath. Jason Rice says he was a soldier in the secret space program, and he fought aliens and such like that. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but essentially the implication that I'm getting is that Dr. Stephen Greer is saying that this is all false information and it's being utilized to manipulate you ultimately to believing that there will be this alien invasion or false flag attack. Again, I've seen Jason Rice's his lectures and his interviews. He does come across as truthful, but again, he may come across as truthful, but I don't think it is true. Make of that what you will, and I don't think he's credible. But again, do your own research. You can go to Gaia and take a look at Jason Rice and do research on the web, look up his name, make up your own mind. Another individual who is pictured in that is David Wilcock. David Wilcock actually had a TV show on Gaia with Corey Goode, where David Wilcock would interview Corey Goode. David Wilcock is also on the outs with Gaia right now. The reason I bring up David Wilcock is because I think David Wilcock is genuine. I believe he's smart, genuine. I think he wants to get to the truth. I suspect that he has been manipulated with some false information. He talks about secret insiders who give him information. And he consistently says, well, this, and that is going to happen, watch, and it never happens. So that's why I think he's being manipulated. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the information that he gives out isn't true. I believe that a lot of the information that he gives out is true, but the conclusions that he comes to should not necessarily be believed. And again, make of that what you will. I love Dave Wilcock, and I listen to his the stuff that he says. And again, what you have to be able to do is utilize your intellect to pick and choose. Listen to everybody and try to, compare and contrast. Listen to different people and come out with come to your own conclusions about what is true and what is not. So now we're going to go on to the next clip where they talk about, I believe this next clip talks about TTSA and Luis Elizondo. We'll go to this clip and then we'll come back and talk about that.
One of the difficult things of the last 6 months was that I learned that the same group that had been feeding false information to the public through TTSA had their counterparts that had been going into the president's office providing some information, but a lot of disinformation. So the way really good counterintelligence works, or disinformation works, is that at the core of it, there's some truth. So they'd say, okay, the aliens are here, and here's some evidence, but they're a threat to the national security, and we need to have the Space Force.
Wow, Space Force.
And they get into this thing called the White House and the national security state, and they're completely at the mercy of the people who are going to brief them, and the ones who are assigned and cleared to talk about this issue, by definition, have been in those clandestine operations. I did a video brief for the president, vice president, and also for President Putin. That the problem is, by the time I had good access, they had already been, unfortunately, quite brainwashed on this, had already taken policy steps that included the Space Force creation and what have you, and then we were running up against the election.
All right, here in this clip, as you can see, Dr. Greer brings up TTSA, the To the Stars Academy, which had Tom DeLonge, I believe his name is, from Blink-182, as one of the promoters of this To the Stars Academy. And also I have a photo of Luis Elizondo. Luis Elizondo has lately been going on Fox News and other mainstream news or broadcasts and probably podcasts as well to give the mainstream perception of, or mainstream government perception of the UFO phenomenon as a threat and an unknown, we don't know what it is, etc. You'll notice that I have on my channel, those who are regular viewers, I have never brought up the To the Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge, or Luis Elizondo. So I don't think they are in any way credible. So beyond the information that we have is so beyond anything that they're coming out with. Just ignore them. It's nonsense what they say. And later on in this documentary, Dr. Greer talks about Luis Elizondo, or somebody else, one of his guests, talks about Luis Elizondo as a disinformation promoter. I have no interest in what he has to say whatsoever. It's so beyond it that it's just ignore it. And what I want to do focus on, what Dr. Greer talks about, is the Space Force. He's against the Space Force because he's against weapons in space, and I understand that. I'm against weapons in space as well. However, this is my first disagreement with Dr. Greer in this film, and I want to talk about why I disagree with him. He's against the Space Force, and the reason why I am pro-Space Force is because I know it already exists. I've done a video in that regards. I'll put up a link to the video I've done on the Space Force. And I want to talk about how I came to a little bit of how I came to that conclusion that the Space Force already exists. First, we have an English hacker. His name is Gary McKinnon. Way back in the 2000s, this hacker, we call him hacker because he's not really the typical hacker. He broke into the Pentagon system and he found documentation of what seemed to be a space force, that the United States had a space force out in space. And it talked about non-terrestrial officers. Non-terrestrial officers, what's a non-terrestrial officer? It's an officer who's not on Earth, who's out in space. So this was 20 years ago. Gary McKinnon, this hacker, found evidence that there was already a space force, and he broke in, and the United States tried to extradite him and prosecute him for breaking into their systems. So that's the first evidence that we already had a space force a long time ago. In addition, there's a gentleman by the name of John Leonard Walson. He developed his own telescope system where he can counteract one of the problems with using a telescope on the ground is that the Earth distorts what you can see. The Earth's atmosphere distorts what you can see out in space. That's why telescopes are put on mountains, because there's less atmosphere that will distort your view of space. What John Leonard Walson did was he developed his own telescope glass that allows him to compensate for the distortion of that atmosphere and get very, very clear pictures of what's out in space. And what he found, I'll put up one of them right here. He found massive spacecraft. I have every reason to believe that these massive spacecraft that are in orbit or Earth are the United States secret space program. And I believe that these things are capable of flying to different planets. Again, I've done a video on that, on the secret space program. So the reason I part companies with Dr. Greer here is that this Space Force is already in existence, and it has been for decades. And the public Space Force that was created by President Trump, that is now already created and is growing, it is my opinion that this will be utilized as a means of making public the secret space program. So, he's against weapons in space. My answer would be that they're already there and have been there. And that the Space Force itself, the reason it was created is to make public this secret space program. And I am all in favor of everything that shines a light on truth and the public knowing what the truth is and what's going on. So that's why I part ways with Dr. Greer in this regard. Next, we're going to go and talk about this, see this clip from the documentary, which his name is I believe it's Daniel Sheehan or Sheeran. My apologies for getting his name incorrect. They'll show it later on in the video, and we'll see it. I believe he's a constitutional attorney, and he's going to talk about how much of what is going on is extra constitutional. It's essentially breaking our Constitution, our laws, a violation of the United States. Let's take a look at this clip right now.
One thing is clear is that the normal constitutional channels that you would think would be in control of that aren't. Presidents aren't briefed in on this. Heads of the Defense Intelligence Agency come in who aren't briefed on it, and I'm convinced they're not. From talking to them, it's clear they don't know what's going on there. So there's some other structure. I happen to be persuaded by the evidence that immediately after Roswell, when they recovered a craft and bodies from the UFO vehicle, that the Truman administration set up a body that was outside of the normal constitutional framework of our United States government. And it was made up of major elite people that they view as the real power elite.
A shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself.
It's sort of a shadow government within the government, not just in the United States, but all around the world. And the kind of power they have, both financially, technologically, and the means of projecting power militarily, is much greater than anything that the conventional military or the conventional government or the President of the United States has. Eisenhower knew it, and by the time he left office was very upset about it.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
All right. So here we have Mr. Sheehan talking about how in response to Roswell crash and other UFO incidents, immediately after we had exploded a nuclear bomb, an atomic bomb, President Truman, who was president from 1945 to 1953, started what's called Majestic 12. Majestic 12 is an elite group of industry and government insiders who were able to avoid the Constitution and normal United States federal laws to handle and cope with the UFO phenomenon on a secret basis, avoiding any constitutional scrutiny from particular Congress. Now, why that's important, you see that military, at the end there, you see they have President Eisenhower, who had been a general during World War II. President Eisenhower was the next president after Truman. He took over from Truman. He was president from 53 to 61. And in his goodbye address to the nation, he warned about the powers of the military-industrial complex. There has been some evidence presented by some people that Eisenhower met with aliens and that he turned down the offer that they gave him. I'm not going to get too much into that. But there's also been the claim that Area 51 was developed around this time. Area 51 is the area in Nevada where a supposedly crashed UFO are investigated. They're held there. They're in Area 51 and they're experimented on to try to figure out what makes these operate. And there's also the allegation that there's alien bodies at Area 51 as well. Well, there's been the claim that Eisenhower tried to see what was going on in Area 51 and that he was denied access. And he was like, I'm the president and you're denying me access to Area 51. And President Eisenhower was prepared to invade Area 51 with troops. And they said, all right, if you're going to invade, we'll let you pick two people, we'll let them in to come in and take a look at this place just to stop the invasion. So that's been the claim that I've heard. I don't know how accurate it is, but given President Eisenhower's warning about the military-industrial complex, it tends to give some credence to this claim that President Eisenhower was denied access to Area 51, threatened to invade with troops so he could find out what was in Area 51, and then the Majestic 12 group, these secret elite insiders handling UFO phenomena, said, all right, don't invade. We'll let you send two guys over and we'll show them everything that's going on. And that's been the claim. And that's why it's claimed that President Eisenhower gave this warning to the American public in his goodbye address as he was leaving the office of the presidency. So what do we got next? I got a few notes so I can make sure. Here, actually, I'm going to jump over this clip, but this next clip is going to end with another statement President Eisenhower made in that same goodbye address. Let's go over to this clip, and then we'll come back and talk about what President Eisenhower said.
The ETs actually had reached out to Eisenhower near what's now Edwards Air Force Base, Muroc, and really wanted us to stop disrupting the fabric of the universe with these nuclear weapons and advance in a positive way into space and become part of an interplanetary family, which would have been wonderful for humanity, wonderful for the cosmos. But the people who make a lot of money from war and a lot of control of the populace through fear did not want that. So they circled their limousines and sort of moved aside the good people who would have been arguing for that. And that included Eisenhower.
We must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
All right, so there we have Eisenhower warning the public in 1961, that would have been, that public policy, warning that public policy could be captive of a scientific, technological elite, back in 1961. Now, he was warning about the Majestic 12 group that we just talked about in the previous clip before this one. However, when Facebook is censoring the President of the United States, banning him from their platform, when Twitter is censoring the President, public policy has been captive of a scientific, technological elite. There's little more dangerous to the American public than the constitutional republic. Let's move on to this next clip.
My granddad and I, when we were talking, I'll never forget it. He said, he was talking about Patton. And of course, he said, I was in Czechoslovakia with Patton in April of '45. And I thought, oh, that was neat. What did you do? And then he's like, well, Patton had to secure a lot of the stuff that the SS had. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And they said, well, we went into this warehouse and there were all these exotic, jet aircraft, rocket engines, parts of the V2 and maybe a V3, I don't know. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And he says, I saw a disc-shaped aircraft. And I said, oh, is that the one they built that had the BMW jet engines and the Arata ones in a circle and it didn't really work and everything like that? And he said, no. And that was it.
And so they began to take this in and they started declaring it to be this huge national security state secret. Because it was, other than the nuclear bomb, it was the ultimate potential weapon. And so they wanted to be able to use it at their disposal for their private benefit.
That fascism and the fascistic proclivities of these big industrialists and very powerful people, they know they really can't control 8 billion people unless they first control their minds and their beliefs and their attitudes. As Nazi war criminal Hermann Göring said at the Nuremberg trial, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. This is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country.
The buffoonery of the Third Reich was instructive, and they learned that that kind of behavior wouldn't be effective. So they went subterranean. They went covert. People don't understand. We won the battle of World War II. We did not win that war.
So there we have Dr. Greer finishing up that clip saying, World War II, we won the battle. We didn't win the war. So what did he mean by that? I want to go over some of the evidence in that regard. After World War II allegedly ended, and this is all highly speculative, we're putting together a lot of information from disparate sources. Again, I'm going to encourage people to do your own research. But here's what I've been able to gather. As you see, in the beginning of that clip, we had Mr. Warren talking about his grandpa, talking about being in Czechoslovakia after World War II, and they got a German flying disc. And he asks he asks his grandpa, oh, was that one of the ones that didn't work? Wasn't? He said, no. In other words, yeah, this thing worked. Now, here's my understanding based on my extensive research over the years, that the Germans had this technology, and they wanted to buy time. They knew they had lost the battle, essentially. World War II was going to end. Allied troops are coming in. The claim is that the Germans escaped to Antarctica. Anybody who knows World War II knows that the Germans were very well known for their submarines. They had very high technology, well-produced submarines. The claim is that they used these submarines, loaded them up. They had massive, massive submarines that could be stocked with thousands of people and put tanks in there and craft in there. They loaded them up, and they got their best people and took them down to Antarctica. Now, I've had people say to me, Antarctica, it's freezing there. Where would they go? We have found that there's caverns in Antarctica, huge, massive caverns underneath the ice. And the caverns are essentially are lava caverns. They were created through volcanoes that had flowed a long time ago and created these caverns. And these caverns are heated by the volcanoes as well. You do a little research. In particular, one website is phys.org, phys.org. They'll talk about these caverns in an article, and you'll see, they say, yeah, these caverns are about 70, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And my understanding from what I've heard in the research I've done is they're massive. You could put whole entire cities, massive, multiple cities in there. The claim has been that the Germans went, and the only way to get there is by submarine. You have to go down underneath the water, underneath the ice, and underneath the ice there's these rivers, and you can enter the caverns that way. So they're very well hidden too. You can't see them from above. The claim is that the Germans went there, and they continued their civilization. Now here's where it gets interesting. It's an admiral, right after World War II, Admiral Richard E. Byrd did an operation called Operation High Jump. Now, according to the standard historical reference on Operation High Jump, he just went down there to create a base. alternate researchers have done a lot of research on this, say, no. He wasn't going down there just to create a base. This happened right after World War II, and the understanding is that the United States knew that the Germans had fled to Antarctica, and they were going down there to get the rest of the Germans to make sure that World War II was over, and that they went down there to take out the Germans in Antarctica. And they went with, now, here's what they brought. I told one military guy, and he's like, oh, come on, that I knew. And he's like, that's bull, this, bull, that. He had never heard Operation High Jump. He said, what did they go down there with? I looked and I said, went down, and I showed him the information. 4,700 men, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. When he heard that, he went, all of a sudden he believed me. Because he knew that they wouldn't muster all those forces, 13 ships, 33 aircraft, almost 5,000 men, just for a little research expedition. This was a military operation designed to take out the Nazis who fled to Antarctica. And the understanding that alternate researchers have produced is that we got our butt kicked. And it was because of these German flying saucer discs. They just kicked our butt. So we had this claim that there's Germans in Antarctica, etc. And that's exactly, I think, what Dr. Greer is referencing as well. We won the battle, but we lost the war. Because, now, there's also a very famous sighting over the White House. In 1952 this happened. Admiral Byrd's expedition down to Antarctica was around 1946, 1947. 1952, there was a UFO sighting over the White House. 7 flying discs were flying over the White House. Okay? It's my theory and many other people's theory. These weren't UFOs. These were the Germans. And the hypothesis going on what happened and why they did that is that the Germans, while they were in Antarctica, yeah, but they had limited number of people, limited industrial resources. You know, very difficult to create industries down in Antarctica where you're limited men, limited resources. So the understanding is that they took those flying saucers, flew them over the White House as kind of a warning, saying, here's our power, here's what we can do. And it enabled them to come to an agreement with the United States, a secret agreement. The United States, or Majestic 12, actually, not so much the constitutional U.S. government, but Majestic 12, this secret UFO group in the United States, that you guys work with us to give us your industrial capacity, and we'll give you some of this technology. That ultimately that was the treaty that was worked out with these Nazis hiding in Antarctica. Got it? So I highly suggest, do the research on Admiral Richard Byrd, some of the things he said after Operation High Jump. Try to find some alternate hypotheses on Operation High Jump, Admiral Byrd's operation to Antarctica, and make up your own mind. So now, that doesn't mean that all of these flying saucers were German. Some of them were just like, the other allegation is that they're an extraterrestrial species. Let's go to this next clip, and then we'll come back and talk about that.
Assuming that they've always been there, but what caused this great interest in us, this large incursion after 47? Obviously, the atom bomb. if you accept the multidimensional theory, it's highly likely that we've done a hell of a lot of damage. In somebody else's world, they might have even done more damage there than we did here.
We kicked the hornet's nest because we actually were doing more damage in those other dimensions and worlds than we were doing here.
So just want to reiterate, there we have them talking about that, how we may have been doing more damage to other worlds in other dimensions than we did here. And that's what attracted so many of these UFOs and extraterrestrials to us. And why they spent so much time around nuclear installations. In Dr. Greer, when he had that 2001 press conference with all those witnesses, one of them was a guy who was the soldier in a nuclear silo who's, it was his job to turn the key and set off those nuclear missiles if it ever came to that. He said the UFOs showed up at the base and completely turned off the missiles. And this isn't the first example of that. My understanding is that this happened over and over and over again. They keep on showing up at nuclear silos and turning the missiles off. So let's now, as some evidence regarding the effect these atomic bombs, nuclear bombs, hydrogen bombs have, let's cut to the father of the atomic bomb. His name is Robert Oppenheimer, and let's see what he has to say immediately after his creation, the atom bomb exploded.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
I am death, the destroyer of worlds, plural. Worlds, plurals, not just this planet.
So there you have Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, father of the atomic bomb. After his most successful invention goes off, doesn't look happy, does he? No. And he talks about being destroyer of worlds, plural. Again, suggestive that he knew it wasn't just Earth that was threatened, but in fact, like we stated, that this is a danger to the universe and why we attracted potentially so many UFOs or aliens. I also want to mention, he's quoting the Bhagavad Gita. This is my understanding. I think this is one of the Vedas, but I know it's part of the Hindu scripture, of which the Vedas are a part. And a lot of people who've read these Vedas say, look, these things are describing atomic weapons thousands of years ago. So when he's quoting that I am the destroyer of worlds, that he's not doing that accidentally. He's actually quoting from the Vedas, which many people say is describing other atomic bombs that went off thousands and thousands of years ago, contrary to the mainstream narrative about history that we didn't have high technology back then. In fact, we had high technology, or somebody else had high technology on the planet, and that atomic bombs have gone off. And there are some ancient cities that have been uncovered in India, in Western India, that people claim are high in radiation and have evidence of having been destroyed by a nuclear catastrophe or an atomic bomb. Let's move on to the next clip.
The ETs have done a number of things when we go too far, where they stop it. Now, they don't do anything hostile or violent back. They've made it quite clear through very explicit events where the ETs do not want humans going out there with guns blazing.
A couple of nuclear weapons sent into space were destroyed by the extraterrestrials. The one incident, for example, was they actually photographed the UFO following the missile as it climbed into space and shining a beam on it, which neutralized the missile. And that is their major concern, is to preserve the integrity of the Earth, because it affects their own system. The very end of the 70s and the early 80s, we attempted to put a nuclear weapon on the moon and explode it for scientific measurements and other things, which was not acceptable to the extraterrestrials.
And what happened?
They destroyed the weapon before it got to the moon. The idea of any explosion in space by any Earth government was not acceptable to the extraterrestrials, and that has been demonstrated over and over.
And what's the consequence? How is that demonstrated?
By the destruction of any nuclear weapons sent into space.
So not only are they turning off nuclear missiles on Earth, but the claim is that we've tried exploding nuclear missiles in space and setting them off on the moon, and the UFOs showed up and went boom and destroyed the missiles, so that the nuclear missiles, so they couldn't go off. They won't let us explode nuclear missiles in space or on other planetary bodies like the moon. Now, this falls into something I want to share with you, a claim that I've read, which I think may be true. In the late 80s, the Soviet Union went through its glasnost, an opening under Mikhail Gorbachev, and they said, we're going to stop this whole fighting Cold War thing. We're going to get together with the United States, no longer be your enemy. And it was the end of the Cold War, and eventually the Berlin Wall fell, and all this yay stuff happened. I have read claims, and I don't know how accurate it is, I just want to share these claims with you, is that the reason that happened is that these UFOs showed up, and they didn't just turn off the nuclear missiles. They came in the United States and the Soviet Union, and they showed up on all their nuclear bases, and they didn't make them temporarily inactive. They made them permanently inactive. They just wiped them out. So neither the United States or the Soviet Union was ever going to be able to fire any nuclear missiles, because those nuclear missiles weren't going to explode. They were made inert. And that's why the Soviet Union essentially went through glasnost and came together with the United States. I don't know how accurate it is, but given all of these other pieces of information that we're deriving, it has a much greater likelihood of being true, in my opinion. Let's go on to the next clip.
When Unacknowledged went viral and got hundreds of millions of people to see it, within months, they stood up the TTSA with Luis Elizondo, who is a famous disinformation operative in the Pentagon, at least amongst intelligence officials that I've met with, and others who are well-known disinformation figures within the UFO subject. That began the whole process of trying to pull the narrative back to, gee, we don't know what these are, but here's the evidence that we're, quote, leaking, which wasn't a leak, it was a controlled release. And then they hit the button, so the mainstream media that will take dictation from the intelligence community begins to cover it in the New York Times and CNN and every network around the world. Whereas the Disclosure Project has 100 times more direct military witnesses and better evidence. And they wouldn't touch it because it doesn't have the threat narrative attached. It doesn't have the agenda attached.
I shared this particular clip because it fits in so well with my video that I did prior to the release of this documentary, the U.S. government released the UAP, or Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Report, which by some was much anticipated. Many of us thought it was going to be a big nothing burger, as some have called it. Fully agree with that. Didn't expect it to be much. But I did a complete reading of the UAP report. I'll throw up a link to that right now, to the UAP report that I did on my channel. And it essentially comports with everything Dr. Greer is saying right here. But I said it before this documentary was released. So we're basically on the same page. Take a look at the completed UAP report if you like. We'll move on to the next clip.
The facts about UFOs are so much stranger than the lies that you discredit yourself simply by telling the truth, especially when it comes to so-called alien abductions. Perhaps the most devastating aspect of the cosmic blood libel is the hoaxing of alien abductions by humans in order to create a culture of fear towards extraterrestrials. Dozens of insiders have confessed this secret to me, but it wasn't until 2016 that I was able to get one of them to say so on camera.
We did do that, yes. OSI did that. There was a special group out of the 7602nd Air Intel Wing at Fort Belvoir that came out and did that. They had these people that had maybe some sort of defects, anatomical defects that were brought in to fool people into thinking they're aliens. Yeah, I can't give you any specifics because the program is still classified, and they probably still doing it. I wouldn't doubt it. They were still doing it. These civilians got onto the base and got into something, and they saw something they weren't supposed to see, and this group came out and went into their home and scared the dickens out of them and
staged an alien event.
Exactly.
So here we have an OSI Air Force gentleman claiming that alien abductions aren't alien abductions. It's actually the U.S. military doing it to civilians. I just want to point to one thing that I always felt was strange that further confirms it, and it's something that most people are maybe aware of. It's the movie Fire in the Sky. The movie Fire in the Sky is about, it's a true story. It happened to a logger. His name was Travis Walton. He's out in Arizona, I believe it was, the state of Arizona in the United States. He was logging with a bunch of his buddies, and then a UFO showed up. His buddies took tail and ran, but the UFO abducted him. Now, there is a lot of evidence, including the technology involved, that would say, well, maybe it's not humans because it's high technology, but there's also been the suggestion that our military does have this high technology. They're just hiding it. So maybe that's not such a good disclaimer to the fact that it could be humans perpetrating these abductions and not aliens. However, the one thing that I always thought was very strange is that Travis Walton has consistently said he didn't just see aliens, or as this OSI officer said, maybe just humans with deformities. He also saw humans, just blonde humans without deformities, looked just like us. They were there also when he was abducted and taken into the UFO. But guess what? Anybody who saw that movie knows that was completely out of the movie. At no point did they show humans in the UFO abducting Travis Walton. to me, the fact that they hid that kind of gives some credence to the fact that, yeah, they're hiding it because it's actually humans doing the abduction, not aliens. Got it? Let's move on to the next clip. Just got a couple more and then we're going to finish up.
Colonel Corso was given the job by General Trudeau for the Army in research and development of foreign technology. But the foreign technology is really foreign. I mean, it's so foreign, it's out of this world. And he explained to me that he had something called a nut file, of which he had fiber optics, high tenacity fibers. He named the things physically that he had there. He knew they came from extraterrestrial crashes or extraterrestrial materials they had recovered. And it was his job to take them to big companies to be back engineered. Now, in Colonel Corso's time, it was 1960, but this had been done way before 1960. These were extraterrestrial artifacts that had to go into industry. So for the first time in my naive years of research, I realized why the secret was secret. I always thought it was about, everybody would panic, then the religions would fall, and I had no idea this was going on. And ever since my association with Colonel Philip Corso, I realized what this is about. What this is about is the toys, the artifacts. And it's really about the industry. It is not about whether people would be scared or whatever. I think that the younger population and people that have studied this know that there is no danger. I mean, if they're not going to bomb you during the time you're doing the H-bomb tests in the Pacific, I don't think they're going to decide to come out of nowhere and bomb everybody or to have an invasion. There are too many times where we could have had an intervention that was hostile, and we never have, and we're the enemy.
So here we have her mentioning Colonel Philip Corso. Always surprises me how few people are aware of Colonel Corso in his book, and I just want to summarize it real quick. I'll put his book up here right now, The Day After Roswell. Colonel Philip Corso worked in the Pentagon, and he came out with this book, 20 years ago, I believe it was, a little more. I think it might have been the late 90s that he came out with this book, and never surprises me that people don't know his book. I was a teacher for a few months at a computer school, a vocational school, and one of my students, I would always surprise my students with all the answers. They would ask me a lot of questions that didn't have to do with computers. They asked me about all kinds of subjects, and I'd always surprise them with my answers. And one of the questions they asked me was, who invented the computer? So I turned around, I had a big screen which I could show everybody so everybody could see everything. I turned around on my computer, typed in, boom, and brought up The Day After Roswell. And I said, well, here's a book called The Day After Roswell. It was written by a colonel who worked at the Pentagon. He said after the Roswell crash, the UFO crashed in New Mexico in 1947, that it was his job to take all of the things the technology that they found in this crash and to farm it out to different corporations so they could reverse engineer it and get technology out of it. And among the things that he said the United States developed out of it were things like computers, fiber optic technology, night vision, a whole bunch of other technologies. And my students are. So that's what she's referring to here. There's a lot of veracity. There's documentation included in the book. It's hard to disbelieve him, given the fact that there's no question he was working in the Pentagon for all those years. And she stated, Colonel Corso called it his nut file. I highly suggest you read the book. It's very interesting. Let's move on to the next clip.
And when they say this is a mystery we need to solve, that is not true. As you and I know, the U.S. military, especially the Navy, has reams of information on every shape of craft, where it's from, who's driving it, what they're up to, you know. Forget it. It's just been going on for 70 years. The military-industrial complex is not stupid. Neither are the branches of the military. They know exactly what's going on.
And again, this just goes to the point that you can't, why I don't even listen to TTSA, to the Stars Academy, Luis Elizondo. Say, come on, you expect us to believe you had, after all this time, they have no idea. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's lying. I'm not even suggesting Luis Elizondo is lying. That's not what I'm doing. There's something called compartmentalization. Compartmentalization is where only the people who need to know the information know the information. But the people who need to know the information have all the information on what's going on. It's alleged, I think it's alleged in this movie earlier, and I've seen it alleged in other places as well, that they've got lists of dozens of different extraterrestrial species, and a whole list of, you know, what they're like and what type of craft they fly. It's hard to believe after all this time they don't have this information. And that doesn't mean everybody in the military knows it. Only the people who need to know it. Okay, let's move on to the next clip.
Meanwhile, we published a letter that was written to Ben Rich, the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works. And the person writing was a friend of Ben Rich and said, "Are these UFOs ours or extraterrestrial?" And Ben Rich writes back, "They're both." He acknowledges that they are both extraterrestrial and ours. Now, this is not some ufologist. This is the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, the premier aerospace engineering entity arguably in the world.
Another man exchanging letters with Ben Rich was military aerospace historian James Goodall, who was Rich's pen pal and confidant for 25 years. I met Mr. Goodall in April of 2021 at the 20th anniversary of the Disclosure Project, which we celebrated in Scottsdale, Arizona.
He was dying of esophageal cancer. This is the mid-90s. He'd already retired from Lockheed. And I tracked him down. He was at USC Medical Center near the end of his life. And we were talking about John Andrews and some other stuff, and we started talking about UFOs. And he said, "Jim, we have things out in the desert that's 50 years beyond what you," and he was, talking directly to me, "beyond what you can imagine. And if you've seen movies like Star Trek or Star Wars, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort." I said, "Ben, you want to expand upon that?" And typical Ben response was, "No."
So here they're talking about Star Trek, Star Wars, been there, done that. That means massive ships able to go to different solar systems. I've heard claims that we've even been to different galaxies. Now, here's where I got to part ways with the movie, and they said, and we decided it wasn't worth the effort. I don't believe that. They're like, hey, we don't want to go to these different star systems, and I find that hard to believe, and that's where I point to the existence of the Space Force again, and that it does exist, the secret Space Force, and that's why I support the Space Force, because I believe it's ultimately part of a plan to introduce the secret Space Force and the technologies that are involved with it. And I think that is for the betterment of humankind. Let's go on to the next clip.
I think we need a lot of skepticism. If it's coming out of the US government or any other government and the mainstream media, until proven otherwise, it is cherry-picked information and someone has an agenda because they've hit the button, the go button with the mainstream media to cover it in a very specific way that does not redound to the benefit of the human race.
It's not to the benefit of the human race. What is to the benefit of the human race is the truth and knowing what's going on. I just want to end with this. And then we'll cut away to the final 3 or 4 minutes of the movie. Kind of touches base with what I'm going to finish up with here. This is my last say on this. I think that the key is consciousness. And that's why I encourage everybody to take a look at Dr. Greer's CE5 app. Again, we'll post a link to it down below. But it really appears that consciousness is the fundamental aspect of the universe. To quote Hermeticism, everything is mental. And not in a Buddha sort of way. But everything is consciousness. And that's why meditation has been such a vital key for enlightened individuals. And people like Buddha, and even I am of the opinion, based on my own research, Jesus as well. Both these individuals, and it appears that Jesus may have gone to India and picked up on Buddhist teachings and came back and taught those. In particular, the Sermon on the Mount, my understanding, tends to be of a very Buddhist nature. But consciousness is key. And that starts with you. What you think, what you do, how you act. So love each other. Love and light is key. We'll gonna cut over to the last few minutes of the movie. Thanks everybody for watching and listening to me. I appreciate it. Oh, and like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. I'm also gonna put my PayPal down below if you want to tip me. It'd be much appreciated. Probably put about 20 hours of work into creating this video. So if you can help, please do. If not, don't worry about it. Enjoy the video. Thanks for watching.
There is another path, just outside the gravitational pull of that black hole of disinformation. It's the path I've spent my whole life fighting for and protecting. It's the path that leads to enlightenment, world peace, and the realization of technology so advanced that to us they would seem magical. This is the path of truthful disclosure and peaceful relations with our brothers and sisters from the stars. CE5, or Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, is a set of protocols I developed to initiate peaceful contact with interstellar civilizations. It's easy enough for anyone to do, and will absolutely transform your life. Millions of people are learning how to do CE5 by connecting with local CE5 groups or by downloading guided meditations in the CE5 Contact app.
Doing that in the context of meriting citizenship in a galactic civilization is a very meaningful meme. To say, look, we need to work on ourselves. We need to elevate our consciousness. We need to hearken to the higher angels of our own nature, etc. That's all a dynamic that we do have control over. That's why I think the CE5 thing is so important, because that's the best way to get data, not to be speculating, from our own political ideology about what they might be like. We really have to have direct communication with these beings. The more, the better. That dual role of elevating our own consciousness and rising to the highest levels of the angels of our own human nature on the one hand, and reaching out to establish communion and contact with the extraterrestrial beings themselves, are the two pathways that we have. And in dealing with the national security state, we just have to take whatever steps we can in the legislative realm to impose treaties to keep us from doing things like militarizing space and developing space weapons and all that kind of stuff. That's another third leg of this stool that we have to really do to exercise whatever kind of control we can have over the political realm.
And that, I think, is the only way we're going to have not just world peace. You know, world peace should have happened at the end of World War I. We have to have universal peace. At this point, world peace is too late. We're already in an interstellar moment. We're already in a cosmic time. So we have to have universal peace. And universal peace comes from both our external policies and behaviors and from within, the great peace within, the state of universal consciousness.
As we wrap up this film, we are seeing the threat narrative intensify by the day. Language like, "We need to stop trying to contact aliens," seems to confirm my long-held suspicion that CE5 would be blamed for a staged alien attack. Do not believe this lie.
This isn't entertainment. This is our survival. I saw that Dr. Greer would never stop doing this until he took his last breath, and that he needed help with this. This is not about us. It's not about, fame, fortune, money. There's no money anyway in all this. It's about finding a group of people that have the same vision, but the most beautiful vision he has. And I've attended so many CE5s, is that he has found a way, a non-hostile way, to communicate with who's ever out there, because whoever's out there is depending on him to change this situation. So that, for me, is the most important. The CE5 protocols that everybody can do is gonna make a darn difference. So for me, the Disclosure Project is a miracle. And it hasn't been easy. It has not been easy. Can I give you a hug? I love you. You just keep going. We're here. You just keep going, okay? I'll never leave you, so you just keep going. Do what you do. And do what you do the best, because if we don't do it, nobody's gonna do it. Do you understand that? Okay. Yeah, okay, can I go outside and get some sun?